Hope everybody's doing well. I am so impressed to see the people that are here and how anxious you all are to be here. You made us give a little pause to our upcoming how we'll advertise these, because if you look at the flyer says that the meeting starts at 1. When you receive the link, the Zoom portion starts at 12:30, and the reason it starts at 12:30 is we invite the presenters, the speakers on, so that Richard can check their connection and make sure there's no hiccups or issues or problems or anything else. So truly, for general membership, the meeting starts at 1 o'clock. For the Zoom portion opens up at 12:30, so we can do some behind the scenes stuff. But I'm super glad to see that you all are here. And that means you're interested in LIAF and you're impressed enough to get here, or you want to get away from your job for an extra 30 minutes, which I won't say I understand. I'll lie. Okay. We have two really good speakers for you today. So I'm super excited about the meeting and about what you all are gonna hear. And then there's also a bit of a like I promised in thing, there is a surprise coming for one member. While I've got you and while we have a minute, did I see? I know Laura Tooley. Laura Tooley, I hope you're paying attention because I'm about to call you out once Richard tells me how. So if I ask you to unmute, Richard, will that work?
You want to unmute? Yeah, that's unmute.
So Laura Tooley, I'm asking you to unmute if you would, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Very well. Very well. How are things in Fort Lauderdale?
Growing. Everything's growing.
And we're all suffering growing pains. I understand.
Even with the lack of water.
Yeah. Laura, the reason I called you up, and I don't mean to call you on the carpet, so don't say anything that you don't need to or don't want to, but Fort Lauderdale passed fertilizer blackout recently. Is that correct?
You kind of froze up a minute there. Fertilizer ordinance you're asking about?
Yeah. Is there a blackout period for fertilizer application in Fort Lauderdale?
Pretty sure they just passed something recently.
That's what I understood. I received an email this morning and I told the person I would look into it. It's not a surprise. I think they were talking about it. I just didn't know it had actually been implemented. Are you familiar with it? Can you provide any details?
That's something that code usually handles, and we're separate from code. So I'd have to check into it for you.
Are there maybe any of your code people on in this meeting? I see Kirsty's here. She's not code. If there are any Fort Lauderdale code people here, text. Oh, Kirsty.
An article from Fort Lauderdale. Did you know the city of Fort Lauderdale prohibits its fertilizing in the summer?
Kirsty just sent a link to an article stating what we're talking about, that there appears to be a blackout period. I think I read this morning from June 1st to end of September. Kevin is more familiar with this than I am. I really just wanted everybody to be aware of it because those are the kind of things that can kind of sneak up and bite you. There was a crew doing some fertilization of some royal palms, and they were questioning it, and I was a little unaware until I saw the article. So for just general information, we're passing that out, that indeed there is a blackout period. Kirsty, is that on the, can they download that and see that, Richard?
She gave the link, but I just linked directly to the image.
Can you put it on our webpage?
Yeah, I can put it on our webpage, and also I was going to do it because I was trying to be smart. And
so on our webpage, if not via what Richard's able to do here, oh, there we go.
If we had a quick minute.
That's the one I read this morning. So indeed. And it talks about the blackout period. You can see it there, June 1st to September 30th. And it says no one shall apply fertilizers containing nitrogen and or phosphorus to the turf.
There you go.
Okay, turf or landscape plants during the prohibited period. So really just to get you all aware that is occurred for Fort Lauderdale. I don't know, Kevin, you might, are there other cities on the East Coast that have this? I know the West Coast is loaded with them. Are there others on the?
Not that I've been able to find, but I mean, I think it's a smart idea, obviously considering things like the Watershed Act. So we're adopting it as a policy, as a company. We're just not gonna fertilize in the summer,
Okay, so
unless we need to do some spots.
And you don't want to get hit by the fine anyway.
if there are any other cities that have enacted it, feel free to speak up so we can announce it to the group and keep them posted so it doesn't surprise anyone.
And if there is, and there is a link at those other cities, please feel free to share it with us at webmaster@landscapeinspectors.org so that we can try to compile a list that maybe we could put up on a page on the site.
Good idea, absolutely.
I'm not unsure.
Okay. And same thing for any general information that you've got or want to share. I see Donna Torrey has chimed in. And for those of you that do not receive emails from Donna, get your email to her because the county is actively pursuing a tremendous amount of education. And you want to get that the notifications from her. Donna does a very good job putting them together. They're very concise. There's links in there and everything you could possibly want. So I strongly recommend reach out to Donna, get yourself signed up on those so you're aware of all the course offerings that right now are coming through the Broward, UF-IFAS Broward, as well as Henry. I have not seen if he's on here yet, but I'm glad to say there's a number of people and Henry is usually one of them. Dade County is doing a super job of making available educational times, periods, people and everything else. So same thing, get your email out to Henry so that you are indeed able to see what's going on in Dade County for those of you that are down the Dade County way. I will also tell you, thank goodness it seems to be that we, being just Florida and the United States in general, are slowly emerging through the first phase of the coronavirus. And as we do, it's time for LIAF to start considering our norms and getting back to some of our norms. And of those would be for like the Broward chapter to have some meetings in person. And most, or is bigly a word? I'm about to use it. Sure, bigly. Would be the seminar. We postponed way down. Originally, our seminar was in March, or not originally, because December will correct me for that on that. We had been running the seminar in March for an extended period of time because it worked well. The better chance the temperature was going to be cooler, et cetera, et cetera. So for the outside portion, we're now already, coming up almost June, and we haven't decided what we're going to do for the 2021. Pick a time frame. There's an executive board meeting today, as well as a general board meeting today, and that's going to be one of the key topics of our discussion, is to pick a date. So our goal is to have this seminar go forward in 2021, as we have in all the other years. We just want to make it as palatable to everybody as we possibly can. So it's going to be a little bit changed, but there will be a seminar in 2021. We'll get that information to you as fast as we can. We probably will even put out some of it before we have all of it. That's a good way to say it. We're going to want to give you, as we come in with a range of dates. I'll even shoot out a range of dates. We'll put out all that kind of information. Now, I will ask those of you here, when you have seen or heard good speakers, that please send that information back on to us, and everything can go through the website, because we're always interested in wonderful topics and excellent presenters. So when you get that kind of information, feel free to send it on. All right. What else did I have? That was that. Kevin, anything you've got?
Other than, no, certification is moving along, and we've gotten 5 new people this month, or we just certified rather, and we'll probably have another certification coming up in the next 30 to 60 days if anybody's interested.
So you can't see Kevin, he's invisible over here, but the certification has really come a long way. And in the past 2 years that Kevin, at least 2 years that you've been doing this, you've been consistently certifying new members, and that's extremely important. That those of you that are out there that are general members, you're welcome to keep attending. We love having you, and you have basically all the rights of the association. What we encourage you to do, though, if you're going to be in this green industry, is become an LIAF certified landscape inspector. that's that next level, that quality level that we want to put out there. It's not, certainly not impossible, but once you get it, you've got a certification that is very meaningful in the green industry. So we encourage you to do it, and we want you to stay active. Once you get that certification, then you also need to remember that CEUs are what keep a certified inspector up to date and to show that they are on top and the most knowledgeable out there. So CEUs have become a little bit of a hiccup, especially due to the Corona shutdown and problems. So those of you, every meeting you attend that you sign up, you get a CEU for that. Then seminar, I think there's 4 a day available seminar. Plus we have reciprocity with several other associations, including ISA, FNGLA, which
FACE.
Yep, FACE and Laura, not Laura Tooley, but the other Laura from
FEOC.
CPCOs, FDACs. So there's lots of other places you can get them. Primarily, the ones that you're going to get, though, are from LIAF and LIAF meetings, because there certainly are some very specific things to being a certified landscape inspector. So we are kind of protected. Yes, we give out our CEUs, especially where ISA and some of those ones come into play. But when we receive some from other places or distant learning or things that may certainly be important, don't get me wrong, I looked at one yesterday that was for the American Heart Institute or Red Cross. Hey, at my age, I hope everybody's learning how to do CPR, because somebody may need it someday. So we're not in any way saying that it's not important for you to know, and we really strongly encourage you to learn all that you can for the green industry and anything involved in it. What we are looking at, though, when it comes down to certification and CEUs that keep you a certified landscape inspector, that is, I gotta admit, Terrell, that is a little harder to get. And in just a minute, I'm going to wait for him. Terrell McCombs has entered the room. Greetings, Terrell. And Terrell is the one that I passed that information on to. So Terrell is kind of the keeper of the big book, so to speak. And when you get CEUs, or when you come outside and say, hey, I attended a meeting, are we going to get these CEUs? Yes, it comes to us, and I've got a board that looks at it, and we give approval or not. And then it's given to Terrell to be written in the book, and then eventually Richard gets it, so it's on the website. All in all that information should be available on the website. Give it a little bit of time, a little bit of leeway. It will be there. I ask that you keep up on your CEUs. You need 24 over 3 years, correct, Kevin? 24 CEUs over 3 years, and according to bylaws, you cannot get more than 8 in the last year. So the whole purpose is to keep people up to date and show that certified LIAF members know the industry and know what's going on in the industry. And we have proven to be a very good pipeline for places like the university to disseminate information through speakers. We've had wonderful speakers through the associate or through the university, as well as documents and research that comes out that maybe there's not even somebody necessarily to present, but when they want to get the word out that, hey, we're looking at this, or even before the research is done, they want to reach out to green industry professionals to say, what are people out in the field finding? When you talk about somebody like a Dr. Shabotnik, he's looking for termites out there, and no better way. He's only one person. If we've got the hundreds of people that interact with our association, also busy doing it, we can help him develop his research, which in turn comes up, goes through the whole circle, is digested, comes back, and becomes the information that we need to be able to do our jobs better. So that's super important to us. All right. I think that's about it. And we are, looks like it's perfect time. I will continue to admit people as they come in. Also, the chat room is open.
I don't know who some of these people are. Samsung. Okay, who's on the phone?
The chat room will be open. So what Dr. Farmer has asked is, please ask your questions, but she would prefer to do it at the end. So we'll stockpile the questions. There's a good period for Q&A at the end, and you'll be able to pick her brain and get her information at that time. All right, I have said enough. I'm bringing up Kevin. Kevin, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Hello, everybody. So hi, everybody. Great to see everyone. Okay, that's not going to work. Great to see everybody. We're really excited to have Dr. Faber, Andrea Faber, from Taylor University of Illinois College of Agriculture. There's
Thanks,
Faber
Doc.
Taylor.
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Faber Taylor. I apologize.
From Illinois.
From Illinois University. Illinois, sorry, the University of Illinois College of Agriculture. Right. And she's going to speak on designing green spaces to promote stronger, safer communities. Professor Taylor teaches courses in horticulture, landscape design, and their effect on human development. So with that, I will hand off to Dr. Faber Taylor.
Hello. Hello. Thank you for that lovely invitation and introduction, and for the invitation to speak to this group. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a great afternoon. You're in Florida. I'm in Illinois. Very different, but we're getting closer to summer temperatures now. We've had some days in the 80s and close to 90s. So I'm going to share my screen. You can see that now. There we go. Maybe this is a familiar scene. Has anyone been to Millennium Park in Chicago? Lorry Garden. It's one of my favorite places in Chicago now. So yes, we're going to talk about today a number of things. I just have a little bit of time with you, but I'm excited to share with you some of the research behind the benefits of green spaces, why green spaces are supportive of human health and well-being and stewardship, and I'll explain the link there. So I'll present some of that research and also some of the theory, and hopefully this will give you a little more, I don't want to say ammunition, but some sort of story to tell when you're promoting greening in your cities and improvements in landscapes. I'll explain some of the research, and I hope that you'll take that research and use it to justify and promote greening in your communities. So a little more about myself. As was mentioned, I'm a professor of horticulture here at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. So we're in the central part of the state. And my areas of research include environment and behavior, and landscape design. So I look at the benefits or the impact of the way we design our landscapes and how that impacts human health and well-being, particularly in children. That's my area of expertise. You may notice I'll emphasize the benefits for children a little bit more, but they are the future. So we want to make sure we are designing for them. And I'm a parent, so I have that life experience as well. And there's a picture of Lorry Garden. Okay, first thing, I've got 5 things you need to know. So that's what this is all structured around, this concept of 5 things that you need to know. First one, humans are quote unquote wired for natural settings. So you might think, what does that have to do with anything? I want to just emphasize that we are kind of moving ourselves towards very unnatural settings as a society, right? We live in more and more urban areas. It doesn't look anything like this, but if you think about it, for a long time, thousands and thousands of years, humans were living in settings like this or other types of natural ecosystems, natural settings. And it's really only in the last couple hundred years that we've been moving into these more urban settings, very built environments. And so we've been adapting as a species, we've been adapting in the last several hundred years so that most of us can thrive in these very built environments, very different from what we've lived in for thousands of years. And this quote by Richard Louv, I think, is powerful. In 1800, 3% of the world's population lived in cities. So what was that, 221 years ago? Today, more than half of the planet's 6.8 billion people are urban dwellers. And the trend shows no sign of slowing. I would agree. Definitely, people are more interested in living in cities, and cities are spreading out to the countryside with sprawl. So we need to consider our physical environments. One, are they supporting our daily functioning? So think for yourself, what do you need to do to be your best? And then, is it supporting children's healthy development? I think a lot of times that's sort of not thought about very much. Children's development, what do they need in their physical environment? Of the top 5 things you need to know, number 2, urban settings, as I've been talking about, separate us from nature or natural areas, green spaces, and that in combination with information overload, which most of us experience on a daily basis, are fatiguing us. And I'll talk about that in a minute. The good news is natural settings or green spaces, which green landscapes like what you're working with, are restorative, and they inspire creativity in people. And I'm going to talk about the theory, why that might be, and then I'll talk about some of the research evidence that's playing out or showing that that is true. So first of all, let's think a little bit about attentional fatigue. Are you feeling burned out, unable to concentrate on your work, uninspired, can't stop checking your phone? If you're working at a desk all day or at a computer, probably this is the case. If you're working actively out in the landscape, maybe this is less often for you. I don't know. It depends. But attentional fatigue is real. And the symptoms include unable to stay on task, unable to tune out distractions, impulsivity, we make more errors, we're more irritable, and we're unable to think long-term or big picture. We often have a daily onset of attentional fatigue. We push ourselves to stay on task and tune out distractions and not look at all that excess news and information and social media that we don't really need. And trying to tune out all that is very fatiguing. It takes effort. It forces us to intentionally direct our attention and tune out distractions. And also, we endure stress every day, which is also attentionally fatiguing, and crowding and noise. And all of these things are just constantly draining us. It's a finite capacity to be able to pay attention and focus, stay on task. And we daily pretty much use that up. If you think of it like a mental muscle, if you know how your leg muscles work, you can run and run and run, but then there's a point where you really can't run anymore. And the only way to recover is to rest those leg muscles, not use your legs. You sit down, you lie down, you take a nap. So we have to figure out a way to do that with our minds as well, renew our attention. And research and theory are showing quite clearly that natural areas or green spaces are really good at doing that, at letting us rest our directed attention and allow it to recover and get back to a good state of being able to do the work that we have to do that so often requires staying focused. So let me talk a little more about that. The theory is that we basically have 2 forms of attention, and people have argued that this is oversimplification, but it's still very helpful to think about it this way. Directed attention is what we use most of the time, and it's a finite capacity. Involuntary attention is effortless, and that's what we switch to, and that's what we're using when we're in natural areas, and that's why we're able to rest and recover our directed attention. So natural areas, green spaces, have a lot of the elements that seem to draw on that involuntary attention, which is the one that's really easy and doesn't fatigue. Like some really simple examples: watching a fire, bonfire, fire in the fireplace, fire pit, whatever you have, moving water, wildlife, the clouds floating by, the grasses swaying in the breeze. All of these things just gently engage our attention. It's not fatiguing for us to stay attuned to that and stay focused on that. And so in the process of engaging in that kind of attention, we're resting. So yes, there's just a recap for you, and this is based on work by Stephen Kaplan and Rachel Kaplan. So the upside to restoring our attention from fatigue is that we have improved focus and learning. We have reductions in aggressive and impulsive behavior, and those have been shown through research. And just if you're curious, what is it about nature? Well, they've tried to categorize what are the characteristics of a restorative environment, which nature or green spaces often have. And those characteristics are providing something that's softly fascinating. So as I mentioned, examples like fire, water, flowing water, grasses swaying in the breeze, or anything, wildlife, things that attract butterflies and birds and so forth. It provides a sense of being away from your troubles, from your day-to-day routine. It doesn't have to be an expansive space. It can be a very richly planted backyard or a courtyard. But if it gives you a sense of being away from work for a little while or stress, then that's beneficial. It has extent, so more than meets the eye. An open lawn doesn't have much extent. There's no reason to go explore because you can see everything at once versus a more richly planted layered planting. And compatibility is something that's compatible with what you feel like doing. If you feel like sitting and resting, it has a bench. If you feel like walking, it has a path. Things like that. If you feel like picking flowers, it lets you pick flowers, those kinds of characteristics. So that's something that might be of interest to you in your management of landscapes and in thinking about fine tuning those to make them as restorative as possible. There's also a theory that natural environments are particularly beneficial for people, but I see it more often in children because they're more playful, in that it provides loose parts. And in landscape management, we don't like loose parts. We don't like leaves and nuts and twigs and stuff everywhere, right? Because it makes for a lot more management. But in certain places, it's appropriate. And when we can provide that loose plant material, there's a lot more creative play. Research is showing this. And so, and you've seen this, it's just very commonly observed. But here she's got a little, she's pretending to have a restaurant and cook with the flower parts and leaves and stuff, a piece of bark. Here they were inspired to create boats for snails, like snails need boats, but they set them adrift using reeds and twigs and snails. The third thing you need to know about the benefits of green spaces is that green spaces lead to higher functioning and healthier children. And I'm going to walk you through some of the research in that. There's a lot anymore. It's been growing. This is a growing field of research in the last 20 years. But all of the findings I'll present in the following slides are statistically significant. These are well-controlled studies, and they have been published in peer-reviewed journals. And they build on theory, like the ones I mentioned, the attention restoration theory or the loose parts theory. One study that we did, my colleagues and I, was conducted in Chicago Public Housing, and this was a while back. So these are images actually of Robert Taylor homes, which are no longer there. Most of them are not. But one of the things we looked at was that some of the courtyards there were barren, no landscaping left, it had all been removed and paved over, and then some still had little pockets of shade trees and grass, lawn, and so forth. And what we found was that in that setting, a green view made a measurable difference in children's functioning. And also in adults, there's two different studies, but same setting. And we looked at what their view was from their apartment onto those courtyard spaces. And surprisingly, the greener the view, the higher they scored on measures of being able to pay attention, inhibit impulses, and delay gratification. And these were standardized psychological tests that we employed. And it was most significant for girls. The boys, it was an unclear relationship, and other studies have shown it is beneficial for boys, but in this one we did not find that. And so we were just very surprised because everything else is pretty much held constant in that situation. And we also found just collectively that the girls had greater capacity for self-discipline based on these measures that we used. In a different study looking at courtyard spaces, again, some had trees and a little bit of lawn, and some really had nothing. And in comparing what was going on in those spaces, looking at people's behaviors and activities when they're outdoors in those spaces, we saw twice as much play happening in the green spaces, the ones that had higher levels of vegetation, and more creative play, which fits with that theory I was talking about earlier. We did observe children playing with sticks and driving cars through the tree roots and things like that on the ground. We did not see differences in other activities, so they were pretty well equally dispersed throughout the development in those courtyard spaces, but when they were in a greener space, they were more likely to be engaged in play. And play is really important for child development. I don't think everyone realizes that. You think play, play, but it's, if you do any reading or research on child development, play is that is their work. That is where they learn and grow. And we also saw that they had more accessible adults, which is really important for safety, for socialization, and just training, and children learning to speak with adults and to learn from adults. So we also have done some research with children with ADHD, and that's a neurobiological disorder characterized by developmentally inappropriate impulsivity, inattention, and in some cases hyperactivity. And almost 10% of children in the US have been diagnosed with this, according to the CDC. And so we were wondering, based on the symptoms, their symptoms are an awful lot like attentional fatigue. And we were wondering if when they play in green spaces or spend time outdoors in green spaces versus indoors or outdoors in a built environment, are they better supported? Are their symptoms reduced? We did find through a number of studies that when children played in greener spaces, afterward, their symptoms were less severe, at least for a short while afterward. And this was compared to when they were playing outdoors in a very built area or indoors. And that was through parent reports. We also found the ones that played more frequently, like daily or multiple times a week versus just once in a while, also had less severe ADHD symptoms overall. So they were seeming to be managing their ADHD symptoms better. They were less severe than those who were indoors a lot. We also conducted a research study in where we took children on walks in 3 different settings and then measured their attention immediately after the walk using standardized measures of attention and concentration. And we found, so we were comparing a child to themselves, basically, how they did after every single setting, and these were on different days. And we found that children on average scored higher after walking through a park, better able to concentrate, than after walking through a downtown setting or in a neighborhood setting. And then the quotes from parents, we did focus groups and other ways that they could share their personal experiences. And just some really powerful quotes like, "My son can fish for hours and afterwards his symptoms are hardly noticeable." So just things that parents had noticed in their own child about certain activities really triggered symptoms, and other activities set them up to be their best. Slightly different topic, but still relevant, is looking at self-regulation. So we were just talking about attention deficits and hyperactivity. Well, self-regulation, and this is just in a population of, a general population of children, this study, they were not diagnosed with ADHD. We looked at kindergartners. Kindergarten is an important time for developing self-regulation. That's where you learn to manage your concentration or attention, your emotions, your physical movements, and so forth. And we looked at kindergartners in Toronto, in the suburb of Toronto, and looked at classes that were using the green schoolyard for their lessons. Some classes, we assigned them, and some classes used the outdoor green spaces every single day for a lesson, and some classes only once a week. And at the end of a semester, we found that children who were using the green spaces for lessons or daily were also scoring higher on their capacity for self-regulation compared to those who were only using it once a week. And it was interesting to me too. We tried to start the study in the fall, but there were delays. So essentially, we collected data throughout the winter. And so I know this is not your scene; you don't have snow, but in Florida, but still, colder weather, inclement weather is still seeming to be beneficial for supporting children in their day-to-day functioning. And then there's a benefit. We think it's a cumulative benefit of growing and developing a little faster in that way and being able to stay self-regulated. I want to point out there's a recent literature review, 2019, where they looked at all of the studies so far in terms of green spaces at school. So I just talked about a study that we did in a school setting, and I don't know how much impact your group has on schoolyard greening, but if you do, I heavily encourage you to promote greening in schoolyards and to support trees and other green elements, plants and shrubs in schoolyard settings, because there's more recently a growing body of research showing that there's significant benefits. And it makes sense, right? Children spend a lot of their day at school. Now, a lot of children go to school early for before school care, and they stay after school for after school care or sports or whatever activities. And so they're in that setting many hours of the day. So it's natural that it would have an impact on their health and well-being. So thinking about how do we insert more trees, especially trees, is the beneficial common variable in those settings is important. And so they did find many studies were finding a link between green spaces at school and learning and other health benefits. Some of the findings were that when they took children outdoors for a lesson outdoors in those green spaces, they were better engaged, better able to focus when they came back indoors. They weren't all wild like everyone thinks they would be. Oh, you know, it's going to disrupt the learning. No, they actually found that they were more focused and better engaged in their indoor lessons afterward. They also found in another study that children had greater improvements in their selective and sustained attention after having a recess outdoors in those green schoolyards versus in a built schoolyard. And so many of our schoolyards now are very built, right? They've done away with trees and shrubs, even lawn. A lot of times it's pavement or it's rubber, shredded rubber, or it's maybe shredded wood, at least here in Illinois. I'm not sure what you have there, but some other findings in school settings, children had greater improvements in working memory and reduction in their inattentiveness when they had green schoolyards. And this was in a huge study, 2,500 students, 7 to 10 years old. It was over several years, actually. And then lower inattention and hyperactivity and greater attention, their performance scores were over a 4-year span. So another long-term longitudinal study in children 4 to 7 years old. So the evidence is mounting that we really, and then those studies, they weren't even looking at children spending time in those settings. Sorry, it was just that they had a green schoolyard, like maybe they were seeing it through the window. So it was amazing. Something else to consider is that when we have green spaces, especially in our urban settings, it helps people stay connected to nature, and that ultimately leads to greater stewardship of the earth. We're all a little worried about the health of the planet, and we need it to support us for a long time, right? And so one of the interesting studies or recent works, and Louise Trollo wrote a nice review article that I'll show you in a second. They're showing, research is showing that when children have really positive experiences and opportunities to interact with green spaces young, really young, like less than 11 years old, that forms a bond with nature and a valuing of nature. And that leads to them growing up to be adults who have attitudes and behaviors that are pro-environment or pro-protecting the earth. You know, it matters to them. They have this connection, and it's not just like, they don't have this attitude that, oh, I don't really care if they cut down that forest down the street or not. It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't do me any good. If they have those experiences young, then they will be bonded with natural areas, and they'll see it as something valuable to them. And the research is also, and I think this is really important, showing that this happens when adults experience nature alongside the children. And they need to model empathy for nature and why, you know, why do we protect and care for plants? Why do we support insects and birds and other wildlife? And so, you know, it's not enough. My joke is that we parents, we tend to be like, go play outside. We want our kids to go outside, go get away, go outside. But it's really important that we also go outside. We model that we value nature and that we show them what we value about it, you know, point out the beauty, point out the things that we're finding out there. And this is just from that Louise Trollo lit review, and it's just too complicated to really understand on a screen, but I encourage you to look it up. It is open access, I believe. You can access it. I've got the citation there at the bottom. So it's free to get to it, but she just compares all the different ways that research has measured children's connection to nature and how that's showing that it leads to greater connection to nature as an adult, and also how that also leads to many health and well-being benefits and conservation type behaviors as adults. I could go on all day about the benefits, but here's just another quick rundown. This one I emphasized in this list, many of the studies that show the benefits of residential nature, so trees and shrubs and green spaces in our residential settings, has been linked with lower ADHD symptoms. That was a study I mentioned already, and self-discipline, children's capacity to cope with stress, lower obesity rates, lower asthma rates, better outcomes in high school when they have a green schoolyard, better academic outcomes. I mentioned some of those studies. So there's lots of good reasons to keep inserting nature into our urban settings, right? The fifth thing you need to know is that green spaces also support higher functioning and healthier adults. And just here's a couple of slides showing some of the positive outcomes. So research and our lab conducted these studies. There's links showing many psychological benefits for adults, including greater cognitive functioning and greater management of major life issues when we have access to green spaces and spend time in them. Lower levels of aggression and violence, particularly in Chicago public housing in those settings. We see greater strength of community, courtesy, and mutual support when we have residential green areas, and also lower levels of graffiti, noise and litter, loitering, illegal activity, property crime, and violent crime. These were all studies that compared and contrasted different settings, and those were the outcomes. Studies are also showing, and I'm just hitting a few of the highlights, but there's a couple of good research summaries out there you can access. Spending time in nature or having exposure to natural areas, and this includes urban, like green areas, renewed attention, lower stress levels, lower blood glucose, lower rates of anxiety disorders, and lower mortality rates. So some of our goals should be in terms of we're inserting nature into urban areas. We're trying to add greenness, green areas. Some of the goals should be doing that to support our attention as a society, adults and children, attention restoration, easy access to get out and do that daily, multiple times a day, right? Because we get attentionally fatigued throughout the day. Offering refuge from stress. These green spaces are providing a place for children and adults to take a break from the stressors in their life. It's an opportunity for children to play. And, my slide is changing. Okay. And also is a way for children to be able to bond with nature. It provides them with that emotional connection. I don't know what this, sorry, there's a little funny thing on the screen that's some blue font there. All righty, so the last thing I want to emphasize for you today is that urban greening makes it easier to spend time in supportive environments for people to gain all these benefits that we've been talking about. So greening is a necessity in our cities. Even a few trees and grass make a difference in intensely built environments, as I showed in those studies that we conducted in Chicago public housing. It was not a really rich, diverse planting by any means, and yet we could detect measurable differences in how people were functioning when they had that green courtyard or when they did not. So I encourage you to, not be discouraged by a small planting or a very sparse planting. It makes a difference, even a little bit. Greening does make it a measurable difference, and we need to all get out to nature more often. And as I was saying, daily, multiple times a day. So urban greening makes it easier to do that. When you work in the landscape industry, you're providing people with an opportunity to step out of their office, step out of their home, and rest and recover for a little while. We need urban green spaces that we can visit frequently, and we need them in a variety of forms. I mentioned earlier, compatible with our inclinations is important. So sometimes you just need a place to sit Sometimes you need a place to walk. Sometimes you need to be able to just explore, you know, something richly planted or labeled plantings, different things like that. We need it to be easily accessible and woven into everyday life. So, you know, not making it this one massive park in the center of the city that people can only visit on the weekends. It needs to be all the time, easy to get to. We need green spaces that support recovery from overstimulation and mental fatigue, and to foster a sense of community and reduce antisocial behaviors. There's a summary of some of that research that I was mentioning. You can access this. This is the National Recreation and Parks Association. They published this. And one last little thing I always want to advocate for, to think about when we do our greening, that we're greening for the future and for the benefits of not just humans, but also the wildlife and our insects. And one of the, I don't know if you're aware, but one of the most important groups of pollinators, we hear more about pollinators now, are the native bees. We tend to, in our food productions, crops and farms, oftentimes anymore, they've been shipping in honeybees, European honeybees, to do the pollinating work to promote our fruits and vegetables. But native bees are efficient and are better at it in many ways. And so we want to keep promoting and keep alive our native bees, and they need native plants because that's what they evolved with for their entire species development. So think about any way you can continue to incorporate more native plants into your landscapes. And if you're wanting to know more about this, I highly recommend Doug Tallamy's book. He has two. This is his most recent one. Very easy read. This is a book you can read on vacation. I did. He's an excellent writer. He's great at weaving in like history and cultural phenomena and stuff. And it's not just he's an entomologist, but he doesn't write like an entomologist. He writes like a human. I'm sorry. He's living in America like we all are. And I've met him. We were co-speakers at an event in Indianapolis, and he's wonderful, just excellent public speaker, excellent writer, and really super smart about insects and knowledgeable in that regard. So he has a great idea of every home landscape, city landscape, incorporating certain types of plants. It doesn't have to be 100% native, but just he has done the work to figure out what they need, that are native wildlife and insects, and how our activities, just small incremental steps that we take collectively have a huge impact in terms of promoting those species survival. So great read. And also Xerces Society has a lot of great resources as well. And both of those have plant lists and suggestions that are very regional specific. So they don't, it's not limited to like the Midwest or something. They talk about all regions of the United States, and they and detail that out. So a couple of final thoughts. We can't fix all the stressors that people have to endure. The world is rough, right? And then the pandemic just made it a lot rougher. It's exhausting. We're intentionally fatigued a lot of the time. We're pushing ourselves to stay on task and just to get through. But as a landscape industry, you can help everyone put themselves in very supportive environments. As I've been showing, green spaces are incredibly supportive for human health and well-being. And if you're supporting the provision of those green spaces and the maintenance of those green spaces and keeping them comfortable, you are doing a wonderful thing in supporting our society in terms of being our best. So we need access to these frequently throughout the day, daily and weekly. And there's some of the sources I mentioned. And I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues on some of the studies I presented and some of our sources of funding. And with that, I will take questions. In the show.
Hello. So we do have a couple. one of which from Richard was with the onset of COVID. Oh, sorry, did you have the first question, Bill?
Yes.
Well,
I'm
okay.
sorry, but I'm pulling rank here.
You want to close the PowerPoint?
Very good presentation. I thank you. The one question I had while you're doing, in Illinois right now, are the cicadas out?
I haven't seen them yet. I think it's still too early.
In some of the other more eastern states, I guess they're starting to appear, and I'm hearing them on NPR and different little stories coming out.
Mhm.
How would or how could or should you implement things like that in a park? Would that be beneficial to children? Something like basically millions of bug squash could go one way or the other.
So you're asking cicada control or what is?
No, more since let's say the parks in the east know that's about to happen.
I
would
see.
Would it be wise to then say, let's have a big cicada party and get children in the parks and count them, look at them?
I see.
Or more or less, let's take a couple weeks off from park time because cicadas are.
Gotcha. Yes. Yeah. No, yes, I think those things are very effective in building children's interests especially because it's not something that's always there. It's a novelty and that can be emphasized, like come quick, don't procrastinate because they're only here for a short while and it's only every, is this the 17-year one or whatever? But so, right, that's a great natural PR event that you could promote parks and increase families' interest in visiting parks, being intentional about that. And I see that as a win-win. It raises awareness of like that there are parks and that there's something novel going on. So there will be kids, of course, who are afraid of them, but there are kids like I have a picture of my daughter with the dried shells all stuck all over her shirt and her hair because she thought they were cool. So every kid reacts differently, but maybe if they see other children who are fascinated, they will relax and be able to enjoy it as well.
I saw something similar. Diana Guidry, who is a long time in Broward County in the green industry, we had a what's the one? Bring Your Child to Work Day at the city I work for, and she brought in the ladybug releases. So the young, I guess that's the nymph stage of the ladybug, and they're crawling all over, and she's dumping them on the kids, and their initial reaction was ooh, but pretty soon once that flush got over, they were all sticking their hands out, and letting them crawl up their arm, and it became a totally different relationship with a bug, which I thought was very positive. So that was kind of why I was asking you. Thank you.
That's what the research is showing about the importance of forming those bonds like very young, because they're finding that after age 11, there's kind of a closed-mindedness that is hard to overcome. Also after age 11, I think they're finding that teenagers are so focused on their social environment and trying to build relationships with peers that they're like, I don't have time for nature. That's unfortunate, but they're saying, so start young. It's never too young to be hiking or being outdoors and to help them feel comfortable with nature, like insects and holding them and seeing that there's, it's positive.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kevin. I'm sorry.
You can stop sharing.
No problem. But yes, and Richard's mentioned you could stop if you want to stop sharing your screen. That's okay. We would just get like the full video.
Oh, sure. Okay. Sorry.
No problem. Oh, much better. So no, Richard's question was with the onset of COVID, people have really obviously become more aware of health and safety and personal spaces in the public. What are your thoughts on how that impacts green spaces?
So I've seen, or at least around here, a big uptick in people using green spaces, especially when we were in lockdown in Illinois, because that was the one thing you could do. Like for our family, for example, we would meet extended family in a nearby forest preserve, travel from our various communities and walk together. And it was just in the winter because it was just like a way of seeing them without the transmission of the virus. I mean, so that was a positive actually. And I saw the trails were pretty busy and it wasn't hard, at least we're around here, to space out enough and be sensitive. Generally, also, I think, the latest research is really showing that the COVID virus doesn't, the chances of contracting that when outdoors are really low because it's the air, it's diluted so much that right. So I think it's really just been a good thing for green spaces. It's promoted people's like, there's nothing else to do, right? We can't do the indoor group stuff anymore, so let's go outdoors. I think it's a good thing.
Excellent. Well, Sharon Volmer was asking also, is there a one-stop shop resource of information on these benefits that you could recommend so that we could also point that out to our elected officials?
Mhm. It depends. There's no, especially the work with adults is not that well consolidated in a single space. The work with children is very well documented and consolidated in a single space. And that would be your one-stop shop would be the Children and Nature Network. They not only have endless supplies of how-to and great like one-page summary documents of like the benefits of green schoolyards, all the research findings in a really nice infographic. But they also have all the research pulled together in their website. It's a research library is what they call it. And you can read quick summaries of what the studies found. And then you can also find a link to the original publication. So if you wanted to read the nitty gritty of the research methods and all of that, you could. But yes, so the benefits of green spaces for child development, children's health and well-being, that's up through 18, is on the Children and Nature Network. Let's type that in the website. And it's really simple, like childrenandnaturenetwork.org or something. The website is, I think.
I'm sure we can Google that.
Yes. So, and then as far as the work with adults, unfortunately, I mean, our lab has some summaries of our work that I'm happy to share, but yeah, great. And then there's journals out there. I'm trying to think. There are research groups around the country and in worldwide that are, their group has their research posted, but yeah, as far as like a nationwide effort to educate the public, I don't know.
Well, that's all right. It's maybe a little piecemeal, but that's okay. Jim Plowman asked Dr. Taylor, is there any correlation between accessible green spaces in urban settings and the reduction of littering in these settings, or is there no effect?
Mm-hmm. So the one study I mentioned that my colleagues conducted in Chicago Public Housing, they did find lower incidence of littering in the green spaces in public housing settings. People wanted to keep it nice, because that was one of their few nice areas. I'm not aware of the studies done in other settings or more recently. It's a little out of my area of research, but I'm sure there are studies that have been conducted, and I would search. I think it's generally accessible. The Environment and Behavior is a great journal, and the Journal of Environmental. Those are the types of places that I cannot type. Psychology. I think I spelled that correctly. Those would be the types of places where those kinds of studies would get published. Environmental, what's EDRA? They might also have a general gathering of research findings too, the Environmental Design Research Association, but that would be a good organization to look at their website.
Excellent. William Moeller asks, have you included the concept of plant blindness into your studies or research?
No, I have not.
Okay.
That's something that
Somebody define.
I would, well, I Googled it while we were talking about it. Plant blindness is it's apparently a human tendency to ignore plant species. Let me see. Ignore plant species. It includes such phenomena as not noticing plants in the surrounding environment, not recognizing the importance of plant life to the whole biosphere and to human affairs. So it's basically a philosophical view of plants as an interior form of life to animals, and therefore it's not given certain value. So
Yeah, no, that's not something I've studied, but that makes sense. And I think, again, that kind of goes back to introducing children to green spaces younger, so that and adults guiding them and pointing out, like, notice how these two trees look very different. Notice how these two flowers are very different, and sort of tuning them in, tuning their eye to the diversity and the beauty, rather than just it's green, it's a plant, whatever. I mean, I kind of remember my own aha moment when I was younger and started studying trees, and I didn't realize that I had not really acknowledged that there are different deciduous trees. Like they were all a maple tree in my head or something, until I started to really look at them and try to identify based on leaf shape and things, and realize, oh my gosh, there's like 100 different kinds of trees around here. And I just never, like, that would be an example of plant blindness, like just not appreciating the diversity of that. Just deciduous trees is one category.
interesting. That's an interesting concept as well. I've been kind of curious about. Dr. Michael Orphanides had a question. He points out that homeowners associations, and down here there are a lot of them, tend to think and fund landscape maintenance in terms of mostly aesthetics and how it affects their property values.
Yeah.
So how best can we work in the results of your research into educating them that the landscape and green space is developmentally positive for children?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. So showing them some of the research findings, and I also, um, I have to point to it again. So I have it happen to have it right here. This book, these are my papers. He addresses homeowner associations in here.
Ah.
He's like, this is a barrier we have to acknowledge, and how do we? He's like, homeowner associations wrote the rules. Why can't those rules be rewritten now that we know more about plants and the interactions between plant species and wildlife and our native insects and birds and so forth? So he advocates, he's a nice section on that in there, but
Excellent.
I think just continuing to help people understand the value and working. I see it most effectively from the grassroots approach, when people who live in a homeowners associations start asking for it, saying, pointing to the benefits.
I think Mike is very active, and I'm betting that that's just how he's combating that, and the pushback there. So I
Right.
can
It's
totally
pretty
see how
bad.
that's going.
I mean, I experienced it in my own neighborhood where people will, I feel like I have to speak up a lot, like, oh, actually, that looks like weeds, but
Right.
there's a different
Well,
way of perceiving it. Yeah.
we've still got a few more minutes here for a couple more. Let's see. Rose had a question. It's right. Are you familiar with the National Wildlife Federation schoolyard habitats? Broward County Naturescape has partnered with NWF on a connectivity project to plant trees in areas with low tree canopy. Teachers use the tree planted schoolyard as an outdoor classroom.
Tree planted schoolyard as an outdoor classroom. Yes, of course. So I think maybe what they're asking is, I see another question. So when you say outdoor classroom, people kind of jump to this concept of an amphitheater or some sort of formal rings of seating, like just replicating what you have indoors, rows of seating facing in the same direction towards where the speaker would be, the teacher. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, of course, it requires the skill of the teacher to adapt to an outdoor setting. But there's a lot of research that shows learning can happen outdoors in any variety of planting design. So it really comes down to the lesson planning and the creativity of the teacher and a willingness to be flexible. But I do feel that the research across the board shows the value of trees. So, and I mentioned the attention restoration theory and Stephen and Rachel Kaplan's work, their work and some others, they're advocating that perhaps there's some sort of, I use the word hardwired, like we forever have lived in settings with, in nature. And they argue that trees probably in our psyche, or however you want to think about it, are important to us because they provide shelter, from the weather. You take shelter under a tree. They also provide escape from like being chased by a tiger or wildlife of some sort. You can climb the tree. We just have a strong sense or desire for a sense of enclosure. Like if you in landscape design, we know this, that when we design outdoor spaces, we build pergolas and arbors and other structures because we don't want to sit with the open to the sky all the time. When we're out on our patio, for example, we want that little bit lower height overhead plane because it gives us that sense of enclosure. We want a vertical plane as well. It doesn't have to be a wall, but we want to be able to see across it or above it or through it or whatever. But we want that feeling of the low wall or the hedge or whatever it is. So where was I going with this? The strong human tendencies or preferences, there we go, for a sense of enclosure, it makes trees pretty much a must-have. And then somewhat shrubs and other. I don't know if I answered the question. I lost track of what we're.
But it was a cool concept. Like I never really considered in that sense. And Richard was just saying, well, and they create oxygen. But when we were climbing out of the trees as a species, we didn't know that trees made oxygen. We just knew that that's where you ran away from the bear or the tiger, as you said.
Right.
It helped
Preservation
create shelter. So kind of that our lizard brain is telling us one thing about it versus our sort of evolved brain. Then we'll take this as maybe the last one here. Henry was noting that many times resources are geared towards planting trees. How can we change the mindset that maintenance is as important as planting?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Right. There's lots of funds to plant new trees, and then no one wants to come back and take care of those trees.
You got a bunch of dead new trees.
Yeah. Right. Boy, I mean, I don't have an answer for that, but just again, advocating that there's this benefit, and then that you can't achieve that benefit when it's just a twig. Like it requires this investment in the tree to nurture it to get to the stage where it's effective in supporting human functioning. So
that is and Mark astutely notes we need funding and education, which is hopefully that's what we're all doing every day in our professional lives and personal lives, and continuing to be voices for at least the education and common sense approach to these things. So that looks like that's about the end of our questions. Mr. Burns, did you want to move on to part two?
No, I want to thank the doctor first.
Well, let's thank Dr. Faber-Taylor.
We really appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Sharon Bulmer is the one that was able to reach out to you, and you responded so kindly. We really appreciate it. Our association is a very diverse group, as we mentioned in the emails. It's not just municipal workers, but there are contractors. There are every end of the green industry, especially down here in Florida. So your word and your message, which is so important, certainly gets out to a vast and widely diverse crowd. So hopefully that message is carried on.
Yes, please do.
If you at any time in the future have a message you want to give out to us, feel free to reach out to Kevin, myself, via the website. You've got our contact information. We'd love to hear from you. And if we can ever do anything for you, please let us know.
Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I just put my email there in the chat, afaverte@illinois.edu. If anyone wants to know, like, where should I look again, or what are the readings that I was summarizing today, I'm happy to connect in that way. So
Excellent.
good
Well,
luck to you.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Take care.
You too.
Eric, more power.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm going
did Eric
to-
sign in? I said, where's, put us back up.
One moment.
Don't even go anywhere.
I'm making Eric a co-host. Voila.
Is Mr. Powell
So,
there?
Mr. Power is on. He is currently hidden, but he should unmute himself and unvideo himself. Ah, there he is. But
I am.
we've made him a co-host now, and Eric.
He's a little blurry. with
Why?
He's a little bit-
Light is coming on him like.
Is that better?
Well, it's a great view of
Now
the
you look like
pier.
Drax.
That's not bad.
He was moving so slow, the naked eye couldn't see.
Excellent. Well, I will, if you don't mind, introduce Mr. Eric Power is the Director of Planning and Development Services for the City of Deerfield Beach, and he will be speaking on the responsibility of cities to plan, develop, and enact landscape requirements, and the role you, as an LIAF member and green industry benefactor, must play to close the loop. So, did you have any?
I do want to jump in on top of there, first of all. Where are we? Oh, there we are. Hey, Eric.
We're here.
Yeah, hi. That's not what I'm talking about. You said you
Oh,
wanted to know
man.
about the newest. No, just kidding.
Yeah. Which episode of The Simpsons are you going to talk about today?
Exactly.
Eric, real quick before we started, and Kevin did the introduction, but I want everybody pretty much that's in LAF is aware and knows you and the different people that I have. You know, when I told people that you were going to be involved in and speaking this time, everybody was, oh, very good. And nobody really even asked me what you were talking about. That's why I came up with the topic, because I thought, you know, nobody ever asked. They're like, oh, Eric, we'd like to hear Eric talk. So, you know, it speaks very well for your understanding, your appreciation by our industry. But I was going to back up a little bit. You know, Eric's been involved with LIF. I had to text him to actually ask him. He became a member in 2005, and I'm not sure what he's doing over there.
He's waving.
We may have to mute him.
Hello.
And for 6 years, he was on the executive board as the secretary. And I have to tell you, I want to give you a little bit of an interesting tidbit. And Eric, you walked right into it like a large pile of droppings. Could you hold that mug up again, sir? Yes. I was going to say, for those of you that don't know Eric, okay, to say that Eric is not a morning person, yes, you don't need to read his mug. You just need to be around when Eric comes in any given morning. His face, his expression, his momentum, or lack of, says it all. You just, you know, you don't do mornings or ask him a question, because a lot of times, when he was with Sunrise as a 9 o'clock entrance, you know, people who got there hours ahead of time would run up with all these exciting details. And for Eric, it was like midnight. It was like, you know, if you get close enough, I am going to choke you. So yes, I'm glad to see you still have that same mug. But you know, at the same time, I was gonna tell everybody that isn't aware how Eric kind of got more interested in the landscape portion, because by degree you're a not a planner, a geologist, no.
Geography.
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 So you know, as I understand it, and where the city that Eric worked for before he worked for the city of Sunrise had a policy, and that is the last person in the door had to be the landscape inspector for the day. So that I hate mornings. Guess who was the last person in way too often? And so because of that, Eric developed a appreciation for landscape. And I'm glad to say he was able to parlay that, as opposed to trying to get up early, into an appreciation of the green industry. So by the time he got to Sunrise, he understood the interactions of how important a good landscape and a well-planned landscape is to the overall planning that he came in as the principal planner for. And it benefited us greatly in Sunrise. And I know when he moved on to Deerfield, he's moved up well past that now. He's got all kinds of fancy titles and become a real important person. But when I called him and said, hey, Eric, we haven't got you in front of the people in a while, with just a minimum amount of Catholic guilt, I was able to, he was like, oh, I can move this meeting and I can move that meeting and I can make it work, so that he was here and able to get in front of you people. And really for Eric, you've been that way for all the years I've known you. So because of those kinds of actions, the board unanimously wants to give you the Gene Dempsey Root Award. It was a slam dunk. I got to tell you, it was a slam dunk. Now the only thing, and you'll appreciate this, this is the 2000 Gene Dempsey Root Award.
2020.
2020, yeah. Well, it could have been 2000. Because of the COVID, we were not able to give it to you on the big stage. And I would look forward to getting together with you very soon and handing it to you in person. But in the meantime, congratulations from everybody at LIAF.
Thank you. I don't know what to say. That's huge. And I knew in some way you were sabotaging me. You were sneak attacking me to be on this call. And I don't know what to say to you, man. That's a humongous deal to me. I was part of the board when we created that award. It meant so much to us. You know, Gene was the first person I ever worked with LIAF when I was in Coral Springs and I was starting off, and he was just there, you know, and willing to help. And he even let me go drive around with him once to look at trees. And so it means a ton to me that you allowed me to win this award this year. I really appreciate that because Gene means the world to me.
Thank you and congratulations. So please go ahead with your presentation.
Oh yeah, now I gotta follow that up. All right, let me share my screen. All right, so what am I really talking about today? So he calls me the other day and he's like, you know, hey, I want you to do a presentation. Whoops. And I'm like, you know, we just made some updates to our landscape programs that's actually going to commission right now. And I thought, you know, let's talk about those. I thought this was a great idea. So here in Deerfield Beach, you know, Planning Development Services is where landscape lives. We are responsible for the planning department, landscaping, building, and code compliance. We have Harold Hoyt, who is our landscape architect, and Ulysses Barksdale, who is our landscape inspector. I hope they're both on today. I think they are. And they do a tremendous job here in the city. You know, to only have 2 people dedicated to landscaping in a city of almost 80,000 is very, very difficult. And, you know, as Bill mentioned, you know, yes, I am a planner by trade, but a tree hugger at heart. And I do try to work landscaping into all the aspects of planning that I do. And so what I wanted to start off with is a little bit of some changes that we've made since I've been here and some improvements we've made that, you know, between Harold and Ulysses and myself that I think have really benefited the city and maybe things you guys might want to look at doing yourselves for your municipalities. And the first thing we did, well, just really the first part of what happened was we have a new local activity center in Deerfield Beach called Pioneer Grove. And it's meant to emulate the historical significance of Deerfield Beach, which actually is the oldest city in Broward County. And the reason why it's not recognized as that is because it was actually in Palm Beach County back when it was established. So Deerfield Beach was once actually Palm Beach County, but we are the oldest city, and we have a lot of historical relevance to the turn of the 19th century, and we wanted to incorporate that. And one of the things you got to do if you want to incorporate landscaping is have some native landscaping. Actually, we won an award for this program, which was kind of cool. But we have a section of our landscape of our design guidelines dedicated to including native landscaping and landscaping that would have been indicative of the time of the early 19th century. So no date palms, right? No natives, wildflowers, things of that nature. And we want the landscaping to appear very natural, not uniform. You know, we're not a straight row of oak trees every 25 feet on center. You know, we're trying to get more of that natural feel into the Pioneer Grove area and give the area more of that it's been there for 100 years type of look, you know. And from doing that, we decided that we actually had to create 2 overlay districts, essentially because Deerfield Beach, right, we're a coastal community, and we wanted to protect the beach and make sure that the beach area still had that, you know, coastal vibe and the palm trees and things like that. But then we also wanted to incorporate this design standard for landscaping and for architecture as well. And so we actually created these 2 different overlay districts that have 2 very different landscape plans. So it's really kind of cool. And one of the other things that we recently have done is we changed our development code to allow the coastal community to have a larger percentage of palm trees and a larger percentage of arid environment, and less things like St. Augustine grass, because it's the beach. You know, why should the beach have the exact same standards for landscaping as, say, a, you know, single family home, you know, over by the turnpike in Quiet Waters Park that looks and acts and feels just like every other single family home community in South Florida. You know, we wanted the beach to have, you know, a uniqueness to it, and from landscaping as well. So it's not always just architecture and pavement and markings and art. You know, landscaping makes a humongous play into how people feel where they are and recognize where they are. So creating these 2 districts is a large part of trying to create that distinctness in Deerfield Beach. We also created a brand new landscape manual. Very proud of this. It's the most inclusive manual that I'm aware of. We just kept adding and adding. It's over 130 pages. And it's got everything. It has, of course, the 9 principles of Florida friendly, which we've adopted. We've, you know, eliminated the word zero escape from everything. We, like I said, just mentioned, we have elements to coastal trees, different things that people can look at, like what would be in the coastal community area, urban trees, which would be, you know, trees that can belong in the, you know, the commercial areas, large trees, small trees on the utilities, wildflowers, because we're really trying to promote wildflowers in Deerfield Beach. And then, of course, a large appendix of details and things that architects, landscape architects, when they come in and develop, they can go right to this manual and they can pull every single detail they need in order to submit an approvable landscape plan. So this landscape manual, I think, was one of the biggest accomplishments that we've made here so far in Deerfield Beach, to really put all of the information, not just for the residents, but for the landscape architects to be able to understand exactly what they have to do in order to be here in Deerfield. Another recent thing we've done is the mangrove flyer. Now, this is kind of a minimal thing, but, you know, trimming mangroves is a no-no. We all know that, right? Without a permit. And unfortunately, we do get our fair share of residents who just don't know any better. So one of the process improvements that we've recently done is we've created a 3-fold brochure. You know, using GIS in our IT department, we know all of the residents who are adjacent to a mangrove. And this is something we mail out on a semi-irregular basis to residents, informing them of the requirements for mangrove action. We also brought this to Broward County, who's very happy that we did this, and it helps us when we're dealing with cases, because there are some parts of the city where mangroves are on city property, and a resident might accidentally trim mangroves that are on city property because we're adjacent to, you know. So we got a lot of accolades from Broward County for doing this one. And I would really recommend that any coastal community that has mangroves have some type of program where you, on a semi-regular basis, you know, remind residents of the importance of obtaining a permit in order to trim mangroves. Something that I'm very proud of, I know Harold and Ulysses are as well, is we were able to play a very large part in the creation of a park, an historic cemetery. This piece of property was supposed to be developed, be turned into townhomes. Residents from the area came forward and said that about 80 to 100 years ago, this was actually a cemetery for African Americans. Over time, the tombstones and the grave sites have been removed, and the average person just wouldn't know that this piece of land was once something sacred. So the city was able to purchase this property through a program that the state offers, but we didn't really have any funding for it. Using our landscape trust fund and Harold's free services as a landscape architect, he designed this rendering, this plan for what the park could look like. This park is within Pioneer Grove. We just were talking about the Pioneer Grove standards, and we really wanted to create little parklets within this park. So from the street view, from the lower level street view, this area here with the rock work and the native and the pine trees really has a look that's supposed to belong within Pioneer Grove from the street view. This area here is elevated, and it actually contains 4 separate parklets. One parklet for the namesake, Brunhilde Richard Knowles, who was a midwife back in the late 19th century. A tree of life that was dedicated to the people who were buried at the site, surrounded by mass trees. And then a veterans memorial where we can now hold Memorial Day services like we're planning to do this weekend. So this is an aerial of what it looked like completed. I think it looks very on point to what we originally proposed. And here's just some close-ups of the parklets. This is the Brunhilde statue that was created. And this is the tree of life and the memorial. All of them are ADA accessible for gatherings. Of course, this was done before COVID, but they're all ADA accessible for gatherings and for ceremonies and things like that. And the majority of dollars for this park was spent from the landscape fund, for trees and things like that. And we were really happy and really proud to be a part of this program. And I just wanted to bring this up because I thought this was something that it's not often that you get to use landscape dollars to just really create something and kind of have a say in it. I mean, I think that we probably had more of a say in it than say parks did because we had the money. But it was great, and I think we really created something that is really recognizable and unique in Deerfield Beach. So moving on to what I was really going to talk about today. So we have just recently proposed to our commission that we would like to expand our residential tree programs. And so what does that mean? So we offer a few residential tree programs right now. The first we offer is the shady tree program. Probably a lot of cities offer this program where essentially, we want to provide trees and swales. We originally were only allowing this for single family homes that didn't have an association, that had fee simple property. We've actually requested that we expand this program to association property that still has fee simple land, that's still required to have the minimum landscaping for front yards. But we're also opening up the duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. And essentially what this program is that, the city bids and purchases the trees along with a installer who installs those trees, and then the resident pays a 50% portion to that. And one of the reasons why we need to increase, and I'm sure everyone's aware of this, is that the cost of trees over the years is just, it's amazing how expensive trees are. More than likely, this is all because of the recent storm activity we've had and the damage to nurseries and the need to, install new trees once storms occur and things like that. But, if you go back 10 years ago and you realize that an oak tree was $150, $160 and now it's, doubled, it's just amazing what we have to go through. So we are asking for that increase really because it's so much just more expensive right now. The other thing we do is an annual tree giveaway. I know a lot of people do annual tree giveaways for Arbor Day. It's great. We gave 208 trees away this year. We're actually trying to do a second tree giveaway. We do our tree giveaway in the same location every year. It's a fairly centrally located park. However, we don't know, or we don't feel that every single resident in the city is willing to come out to this part of the city to do it. Especially if you work in a city that has an odd geography where it's not easy to get to and from certain places. So we're going to do a sort of like a rotating tree giveaway, for everyone else. And we're going to start locating now this year in October. We're going to do it in the southern part of the city to see if we can get a little more activity and see if we can get some more residents. So expanding our tree giveaway is something we're looking at doing right now. This is something that, obviously stolen from someone else, tree bait, rebate. I love this idea. Really all we're doing is if you go and buy a tree at a nursery or Home Depot and it meets their requirement, we don't care if you're putting it in the front yard, backyard, rear yard, side yard, whatever. We're going to give you $50 back. You provide the receipt and we'll give you $50 back. And this will cover 100 trees for the first year. And we're really hoping that this program is just a greater incentive for residents who just want to purchase a tree. I know some cities do this right now, and like I said, I definitely stole this. So I just think it's an easy program and it's a great incentive. One of the programs we're looking at doing right now is a right tree, right place situation. So we get residents who have to remove a tree because they're in a utility or can't plant a required tree because of the utility. Deerfield Beach, older city. We have a lot of our single family homes with utilities, side, rear, sometimes even the front yard. And it's very difficult for us to make that requirement for our minimum landscaping standards for people to have trees. So what we're looking at doing is essentially allowing us to help those residents either install these trees in a different location that would still meet the requirement, or even in the removal of the situation where they're near a utility line. We don't get a ton of these every year, but we do get them. And I think this is something that's really going to help us because we don't currently offer any ability right now. It's just on the resident to take care of the remediation and then still be responsible for the minimum requirement of landscaping. So we're hoping that this program helps them. And the last one we're going to do is community engagement. We would love to be able to do more community engagement. This is from a community engagement that we did for an MLK Day a couple of years ago, a day of service, where we installed landscaping at an entranceway for a residential community. We're hoping to be able to do more of that. So we're looking for neighborhoods, local residents to apply to the city with that request. Again, we have the free indentured labor of Harold, who will have to do the landscape plan and do the purchasing of the material and things like that. And then we would do a community outreach where we would get residents to come out on a Saturday and help us do the installation. So this is a great way for the city and for local communities to sort of work together to beautify the landscaping that's in Deerfield Beach. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention with Deerfield Beach is that if you don't know what Deerfield Beach is great and what Deerfield Beach has, is we have the Arboretum, the Constitution Park, the Tree Zoo. It's fantastic. If you love trees, you got to come out. And what you got to come out and see is we have a brand new exhibit just opened last week. We have installed new waterfall and waterfall features at the Arboretum. They're gorgeous. We got misters out now. I don't know how much longer they're going to last, so get out there. They look cool. And it's just a beautiful park. And if you ever get a chance to come to Deerfield Beach, you got to check it out. And that was my presentation. I see that there's chat. Oh, that is an older graphic. You're right. I absolutely stole that from, thank you, Greg. Good hearing from you, Greg.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'm sorry. I was just reading the comments.
You could close the shut down the share.
I had one along the same, since you're trying to help the residents with installing trees and abiding by rules, et cetera, et cetera. How is the Florida statute 160045 impacted y'all?
I don't hear you. What did you say? You're on mute.
Don't you hate when that? Oh, no, I don't. Nope. I walked right into it, Eric. All right, I got some on my shoe too. Nicely done.
So many you may or may not know, but I really tried very hard this year to get local municipalities to tag on to a bill that came from a senator in Orlando who was trying to repeal that statute. We did get a lot of municipalities to sign on, but unfortunately it didn't get anywhere this year. From, we all have different attorneys, we all have different opinions. I look at it like this. The resident has a right now to remove a tree without city approval, provided that they have an arborist who has deemed it necessary to be removed. But it does not indemnify them from the minimum landscape requirements that the city or the county has. I don't know who's on this call, and I've said it out loud multiple times, but I am so upset with Broward County and their inaction to this. Broward County has basically mandated that every municipality in the county follow these minimum standards. And when this ordinance came out, this statute came out, they did next to nothing to defend us, and they've done next to nothing since then. So it's been very difficult for every city to struggle with this issue. We've had a couple situations where we've talked to our residents about it. What I've tried to do, and what I hope all of you try to do, is remind residents that we have an arborist on staff who will do your evaluation for a $10 permit. That is significantly less expensive than any arborist you will ever hire to come out and do your evaluation. And most municipalities offer the same or very similar service. This statute that was created, so often statutes for Florida are created that aren't thinking about South Florida. They're thinking about other places in Florida that just don't offer the same services that Broward County, Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade offers. And it's just something that we're living with right now. But, when you talk to a resident who wants to remove a tree, and you can explain to them that, I have someone here on staff who's going to give you an honest opinion and an honest answer about what you can and can't do, versus you spending hundreds of dollars to hire an arborist. I think they see value in the fact the city offers those services.
Well,
Go ahead, you're on.
I mostly am going to chime in here to say that when a homeowner is hiring an arborist and not having the city come out, it's unfortunate, but I suspect that there are some ISA certified arborists who unscrupulously, and based on whatever the client is offering them, writes a report that says a tree is dangerous. By the way, I could write a report that says every tree is dangerous, because every tree is dangerous. But it's fundamental. It's obviously driven by the homeowner's desire to do something different. And I obviously feel strongly about this as well. I don't know. I think Florida ISA recently did a little bit more to kind of discuss this, and I hope they'll do a little bit more to discuss this at Trees Florida, which is taking place in North Florida this year. And again, I don't know what the differences are between the two, but you make a hell of a lot of sense there, Eric. And but I think that people's motives are not driven by the environmentally right thing to do in these instances.
Yep, I agree. It is unfortunate, but we do try to work with these residents to have them understand, sometimes there's other options. There's root pruning and things like that. I will tell you real quick, just to go backwards, one of the things we've been offering, I don't know how well it's going to come up on the screen here, but we created this graphic here that we actually have as a one-page handout. A lot of things that we've done in the cities, we have like this one-page system in Deerfield where we have a lot of information on a front and back flyer to give residents info. And one of the things that we do is we try to get them to look at this, because we don't want people planting trees on property lines, right? We try to explain all the time, trees don't just grow up, trees grow out, right? and don't plant your tree in a property line, don't plant your tree in utility. So we try to inform them a little bit about what we, the tree zones, right? And so hopefully in the future, right, if a resident's really paying attention, they're educated a little bit on where they put that tree. So that's one of the things we do. We do a lot with, a resident who's put a tree on the property line, and now that tree is so big it bothers both residents.
Eric, one of the other things I know that the statute allows, so it's good that you have the arborist as Sunrise does. We're fortunate to have 3 that can come out and participate and help the people and all those things. Where I think we're harming ourselves is in the mitigation requirements that some cities and some counties and such require, especially when you get to a quote mature tree or a specimen tree, whatever it happens to be. Those can come out with super high dollar value, and if people don't know how to properly do those evaluations and look for issues and problems in the tree and scale it down so that it's reasonable at the end. You can look at, just an average oak over 18 inches, and the starting price is going to be $10,000 to $15,000 to replace it. Yes, then you look and say, hey, it's got codominant, it's got these other issues, and you bring it down to a more reasonable rate. So somehow, as bad as that statute is, we need to appreciate the fact that there are some flaws in our tree evaluation system and our tree mitigation system that drove people to it. And once they found out about it, they're like bees to honey or whatever. Right. It's just
so
it's hard.
As a planner with the planner hat on, the way that I always interpret code, especially the minimum standards that Broward County has and that each municipality adopts, is, so for example, you're required to have, and let's just say in the minimum situation, 1 tree in your front yard. If you have 2 trees in your front yard, by that very strict interpretation, I think there's an argument made that if you're removing one of those trees, no mitigation is needed because you meet the minimum standard. That's the type of conversation that all cities should be having about how to resolve that particular issue. And obviously the way around it is I've only got the 1 tree. I've got this, 20-foot tall oak that I want to remove. Oh, let me go plant another tree. Now I have 2 trees. Now I can remove that second tree. That's maybe another way to think about that minimum standard, and not making residents have to hold on to that same mitigation as you say you would a commercial property, right? Not putting that particular, now specimen is different. And again, going back to my concerns with Broward County and not helping us in this particular issue is, again, that those definitions come from Broward County, and everyone's code regarding specimen is probably almost exactly the same. And there's no way around that. You meet the specimen requirements, this is what the code says. But I think in a lot of other situations, they're not meeting those requirements for specimen and they have more than the minimum requirement. I think municipalities should start thinking about not requiring mitigation for those trees being removed.
Eric, there's 2 questions. I'm going to take them, excuse me, in reverse order, because Benjamin Kubiak came in with one, and he's kind of similar to what I was saying, but he said too many municipalities have used the tree ordinance as a source of revenue. The state statute is a reaction to aggressive revenue-driven enforcement. I don't agree with the first portion. I don't disagree totally with the second portion, but can you comment on like the tree ordinances as a source of revenue?
So for most tree ordinances, I mean, when I worked in the city of Coral Springs, there was no charge for a tree permit. Here in the city of Deerfield Beach, we charge a very minimum $10. So when it comes to permitting, I don't feel most cities are making money off of this. Mitigation and code compliance, yes. So actually, just bring up a quick example. The reason why we made these changes, right? The city had 2 landscape trust funds. One was this holdover fund when we used to have a beautification authority, that had about $40,000 in it. It was sort of just hanging out in nowhere. And then we have our actual landscape fund that has about $600,000 in it. And we asked commission to essentially eliminate the beautification fund, transfer those dollars in the landscape fund. And I made sure immediately that the commission didn't go big and say, you have $600,000, you know, we want that. I showed them that it cost us almost $250,000 to do improvements on Hillsborough Boulevard in 2016. We actually have phase 2 of Hillsborough Boulevard coming up. That'll probably cost another $250,000. It costs about $80,000 to do all the landscape at Brent-Hilda Richardson Memorial Park Historical Cemetery. And yes, I'm required by law to say it that way. It, you know, we spent, you know, $30,000 in this park and $40,000 in this park. And so you need that money in order to do large scale projects, especially when DOT's involved, So I would disagree as a revenue source. I would say though, that every municipality must have a very healthy and robust landscape fund, because the cost of landscape improvements along a roadway is so expensive. And even if you're only doing a project every couple of years, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, you know, but using it as a source to pay your salary and my salary, I don't know of any municipality in South Florida that has the ability to do that. Again, that could be a Northern Florida thing, but it's just, I don't think it's anything down here.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that portion. And like I said, and I stated before I read his comment, I think some of it with the outstanding dollar value that can be given to a tree when you're talking, especially again, the specimen or the mature tree, that's something we need to work out. But I do feel strongly that this is such a poorly written rule that it's going to take a lot of court challenges or just total rewrite of it to get it up to something that's usable for all ends. In other words, there's some benefits that can be made out of it, but what we've got right now is soup, and we're trying to build a wall out of it, and we just can't make it stand up. There's no, as Kevin pointed out, there's no definition of danger. The rule says that the person that uses that does not have to request a permit, apply for a permit, or present documentation to the municipality. Well, then how do we know they're using that rule? The whole thing is it's just very, very difficult and very, very confusing. So certain cities, and I also agree with you on the lack of support we've got, not support, the lack of coming together under the county banner, and maybe that's the better way to say it. So cities like Sunrise are negligent in this too. If the cities would all get together through the county and say, county, you be our spokesperson on this, but here's what we want, here's what our combined thoughts are, maybe we could move it forward. But we need the cities to at some point get these two courts to have the courts start hammering out some final decisions to say, okay, what is a single family property? Is it just something that was zoned single family property, or is it actually have to have detached walls and be single family? What change from danger to hazardous? And we really need to move this and make something usable so both sides can come out ahead. Right now, I don't see that as anything close to good for the tree portion anyway, where we're doing much winning.
It's unfortunate. I do compare it a little bit because, again, you know, a building is part of my purview. In the Florida Building Code, if you want to install a cheeky hut, you are exempt as long as a Native American installs it. But how do you know a Native American installed it? Because you're not required to get a permit.
How much Native American percentage do they have to be?
So, you know, it's just one of those things where it's like they don't require a permit. They're just trusting that you're doing it. It's sort of like, hey, I've got my 2 shots. Do I? You know,
Do they have to require a DNA test?
Yeah.
What percentage of Native American? I'm just saying.
Richard's asking what percentage Native American? 51, 5?
Well, you know, actually they're required to have a card with the Seminoles in order to be able to build the cheeky, but it's one of those things, the same exact thing though, where it's like, we're going to trust that you're being honest. We're not going to ask for any proof or evidence, you know, and obviously that can be manipulated.
Then Laura Tooley asked you, how did the city commission's resolution regarding 163045 come about?
I'm trying to actually think about it. I believe one of our commissioners attended a meeting for, I want to say it was the League of Cities, I believe, and he was made aware of she's a senator in Orlando. I can't remember her name right now, and he brought it forward. He asked me if I would help him bring it forward, and then we brought it to, well, we actually contacted every city in Broward as well as multiple cities in Palm Beach County. Not everyone responded, but we did contact them. But it was driven by one of our commissioners, Commissioner Drosky.
Well, that's what we kind of need, is a groundswell. And if it starts with one commissioner, that's fine. And one city is Deerfield, that's good too. I actually heard about it through Casey Lee, when I guess you all reached out to her, and the city commissioner Coral Springs got behind it. And then Casey was asking the others, have you all seen and heard? And unfortunately, it had not trickled down to my level as urban forester for our city. I was unaware of it till I heard it from Casey, but then I was able to kind of push that question back up the line. So I think
it went to every city clerk. So the city clerks are the ones that can forward it on other city clerks. That's usually how it works when there's a reso. So they contact all the other city clerks in the other municipalities and inform them that this was done, and would they like to support something else?
Well, LIF is one of the leaders, and we want to look towards, especially like an ISA and some other ones, to join together. Maybe we need to have some kind of an understanding, a meeting of the minds, a Zooming, so that we can determine what our membership wants, the direction they want to go. Because like I said, it's not necessarily throw it out, throw the whole thing out, but we've got to strengthen it. We've got to make it more usable, so that if there are good portions, or the members feel there are good portions of the statute that should stay, then they can stay, and we want to work that out. But the way it's written right now, it's not really good. I don't think there were some challenges up in Pensacola, but I've not heard any resolution on some of those. So I don't think there's been any actual court rulings on any portions of that statute, like what is danger, what is single family, and the one that kills me, why isn't there not necessarily mitigation, why isn't there some kind of replanting? So if you've got a tree that is a danger or a hazard, I understand that. And does it have to go? Absolutely. I answer the phone and emails all day long for trees that are tearing up driveways and foundations and you name it. We never say no to the removal of the tree. One of the things I disagree with on 163045 is, once you get rid of that, abate that nuisance, there still should be some place you can plant something back. And as you said, most municipalities have said, okay, even though we're not mitigating for the loss of that particular tree, if you fall below the landscape minimum, we are going to make you come back up to landscape minimum, because that's a totally separate file folder. You've closed it,
right?
The tree removal under 163, but you said, wow, that one aside, let's look at your landscape minimum, and it's not there. Please come back up to landscape minimum. So we could, if we could just get the courts to agree with us, if we could get Eric back online. Where'd you go, Eric?
I'm back. I just shared a screen real quick.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
No, I was just reading the comments, and I saw that Mike had asked a question about the manuals online. Just, if you go to our city website, we have a landscaping side, and our plan development services, our manuals there, our code and our permits, all in one spot, if you'd like to look at it. So just letting you know.
Thank you. Eric, as far as, to put on your Johnny Carson hat a little bit, what do you see as the direction? You can speak for Deerfield Beach. You're damn near mayor and governor of Deerfield at this point. What do you see the direction for your municipality and others with the way things are happening in South Florida?
Just with everything?
Well, so, as far as trees and development and
development
space.
Well, that's a great question. South Florida is really all about redevelopment right now. If you're living in a city or you're working in a city that has vacant open land for development, then wonderful for you. If with everyone else, it's all about redevelopment. And I would argue that with redevelopment comes compromise. You need to be cognizant of not just size of structures, that it's not going to be the same, it's not going to fit in the perfect, mold that, some vacant piece of fresh land would have, right? We have everything to work with. And landscape falls into that as well. And compromise and redevelopment is probably the best thing we can do to get new projects moving, because with the new project comes new landscaping, right? And hopefully comes better landscaping. There's a lot of properties out there that have these giant black olive trees that no one really wants anymore, and it's like, you get redevelopment and maybe you get something else, maybe you get something better, talk about green infrastructure. One of the compromises we're doing right now with an art code is on properties where it is not, you're not going to have the depth or the ability to put, say like an oak tree that's going to survive, over 25, 30 years, but we're allowing for things like green walls. We're allowing for potted materials in certain areas. So having that type of alternative as well is important, and sort of just saying like, well, what do I really want? I want to beautify my municipality. I want to increase the urban, shade area and put more green wherever I can. Is a green wall going to get me there versus say 3 oak trees? Maybe, so. Or recognizing that when redevelopment comes, maybe I can't get every single tree that I'm supposed to get, So I would tell you that that's probably the biggest one. I've tried to write some code that's extremely, well, for landscape purposes, let's say shady, that just it's open to interpretation, right? So when we get revisions right now, we go through basically a checklist of what you can do. Can you meet the setbacks? Can you meet a garbage, dumpster? Can you meet the landscaping? Can you meet the street widths? Can you meet the parking dimensions? Can you meet all these things? Where can't you meet them? And then we kind of go through a negotiation of what we can and can't do. And then we bring that to what we call a zoning appeal special master, which is essentially a quasi-judicial judge who can make that ruling versus taking it to city commission. And that's sort of like an arbitration thing that we do with some of these minor revisions that are redeveloping. So that's the one thing I could tell you guys to do is you got to think about compromise.
Yeah, I agree. There's, as most of the cities down here age, but the environment remains extremely popular, there's just a desire to bring more and more people in. Well, sky's the limit, no problem. We're doing that in Sunrise. These 21, 29-story buildings are all the rave, no problem. But it puts a lot more pressure on infrastructure, and the green space always seems to be the one that somehow gets flexed out, because as soon as you get green space, utilities jump in there and say, oh boy, green
Wow.
space. I had a question for you, Eric, because one of the things that, especially in development, certainly comes down to dollars and money and what they're willing to stick into it. And when you're dealing with developers or people that are investing, they're looking to minimize that, understandably, and get the biggest bang for their buck. Very few cities, and we're trying hard, are able to require things like Silva cells, which would open up quite a bit of potential root space and green usable space. It would stop that hard border of saying, hey,
Right.
we have a right of way here, we have a parking lot here, therefore your ability to develop stops there. The cost though is, man, you got to save that. When you throw the cost out from city commissioners on down, start really cringing about throwing that kind of burden onto developers. Have you looked into that or given that any thought?
I have, and cost right now is a factor. The fact that it's not being used, if more people are using it, costs could go down. That's one thing. Another thing that's extremely important, and again, I'm not just harping on Broward County. I know more people than people are just Broward County here, but Broward County environmental services engineering makes green infrastructure extremely difficult. I think we've all been in those situations where you want to do some drainage area, you want to put a cypress tree in, they tell you no. You know, they need to relax some of their restrictions as well. That's a really big one for me, because some of our green infrastructure programs we would like to do, we just get a no from Broward County, and I think that's difficult. I would tell you, I really want to work on a green infrastructure code here in Deerfield Beach. I've been putting in, and we have some recommendations in our code and recommendations in our manual for green infrastructure, but it's not code. It is really my goal one day to make it, though, because if you guys do know, you know, green infrastructure really is one of my passions, and I would love to see it more. And again, you know, putting in green infrastructure could be in lieu of installing some landscaping, because again, you're sort of getting that same thing. You know, what do you really want? You know, you're trying to beautify the property, you're trying to clean the water, you're trying to create nature. You know, so maybe, you know, there's some give to, okay, I can take out 5 oak trees because I gave you a rain garden or something like that. So unfortunately, I don't have that in my code yet, but it's on my list.
I think there are a couple cities that have it in theirs, and Kevin, you may know this more than others. I think maybe the city of Pompano, and it seems it's more in use in the city of Fort Lauderdale. That may just come down to property values, and the city of Miami Beach and things like that, where you've got so much more bang or dollar they're putting in than things like silver cells don't scare off the developer like it does in Deerfield or Sunrise or Coral Springs or Tamarack. Kevin, do you have any experience?
Unfortunately, I don't. I've seen something on Miami Beach. They do solar cells, especially along Lincoln Road, because that's just such a heavily pedestrian area, and they do want to have street trees. But that's really the only place I have seen it, where they're actively trying to use it.
So we've got to get it out there and get it more acceptable. And as you said, nothing like you know, a little, once they start using more, maybe there'll be some competition, and maybe we can kind of help drive the prices down. That would be important. Or come up with another idea. I would, for a long time, we've heard the rumor of the floating sidewalk, where, you know, I don't know what one is. I don't know if it's hoverboard for sidewalks or what, but you know, something that roots can grow under will pop the sidewalk, whatever it happens to be. We need all those kind of things, because I'm sure there are a lot of people out here that are in my position of reviewing plans and reviewing permits, have been issuing permits, you know, several a week for the removal of large established trees because of the damage they cause 20 years after they're planted, which is a real shame, because that's when you want the tree. You know, you plant it for 20 years in the future, and all of a sudden it's tearing up sidewalks and roadways, and it's time to remove it and start over again. It's you got your hands full.
Yep, but it's fun.
All right, sir. Again, I appreciate your time very much. Always a pleasure. We're getting lots of positive feedback on the chat, as you can see. Some people lie. I see Harold Hoyt 3 times has said what a great job. Harold, you cannot do that. But no, we really thank you. And again,
His review's coming up, so you know.
thanks for all you've done for LIAF, Eric. It is truly, truly appreciated. And that's why the award is now bears your name. So much appreciated.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. It was really great seeing some names out there and just hearing some voices again. I really appreciate it. I really wish I could be a part of the group. It's just, what I do now, it's just not possible. Richard, I see you.
Yeah, look at this.
It's good to see. Oh my God, you grew your hair, man.
No, I was saying to Bill, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, because that's how I met everybody here.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ben's an Eagle Scout, by the way.
Woo.
oh, that's good. Yeah, my kid's kind of drops because
Yeah.
of some issues. So,
Yeah, but yeah, my son's an Eagle Scout and he is going to FSU.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, huge disappointment for the family, but we still love him.
It is not a disappointment for your mother. I know better than that.
Just make sure he fills out all those applications for grants.
All
Yeah,
right, thank you, Eric. I'm gonna
thanks everyone.
address
All right.
everybody before they go real fast. To the general membership, thank you all for attending. You know, we're glad to say we're pulling this off every month. We've gone to 2 speakers, and you can see the diversity of what's being presented to you. It's extremely important to us that we kind of answer and fulfill the expectations that you have. So if you have either ideas that you want to hear more about, or speakers that you've heard that you want to get to in front of the group. This one was, Dr. Faber was compliments of Sharon Volmer with Coconut Creek. You did a great job reaching out to her and securing her as a speaker. So with Zoom and the Zoom style meeting, we have a lot of availability and flexibility because, you know, Dr. Faber being in Illinois and the other ones we've had throughout the United States, this is an opportunity right now. We can reach out to a lot of people at great distance, as opposed to when we get back to the IFAS extension station. Speaking of which, real quick, two more things, and I promise to get you out of here on time. Donna chimed in to say that Dade County, she believes, also has fertilizer blackout period. So she was going to send that information that will be posted on the website. So there may well be a blackout period in Dade County. Again, you want to be aware of that because if you fertilize the wrong time, you may get challenged. Plus, the next thing they're going to challenge you for is, do you have your GIBMP? And I'm sure everybody out there does, but just in case one of you has forgotten, that rule and law is still in effect too. So avoid the double whammy, get your GIBMP fertilizer license, as well as know when those blackout periods are. And what was the other one I had? Oh, one of my favorite ones. It is darn near half the year through. So if you have not paid your dues yet, you're not just delinquent. Yeah, I would use another Back to the Future. You're a slacker. Okay, it's time to. We really want everybody to be a part of this. It's a minimum expense, a minimum cost to be active in this association. And we encourage you through all ways, shapes, and form to remain active, to become certified, whatever the next step is. But also along the way, especially with some upcoming changes we're proposing for next year, we want to make sure that everybody pays their dues.
Also, we'll try to get the link up for June's meeting probably next week after Memorial Day. So everybody take our best.
So, you know, on every month, our goal is still the last Thursday of the month, and that's what we've been doing from 1 to 3. So even if that says 12:30, remember that's for people to sign on early. So 1 to 3, the last Thursday of the month, but it's always posted on the website, and you receive emails as well. That is really it. I don't see any questions. Oh, I did, from Mike Orphanides, GIBMP in Broward on Friday, June 18th. So anybody of you that need it, get that. And Mike, I believe that is still virtual. And Mike, while you're there, do you have a date for the reopening of the IFAS, not ballroom, it's not quite that big, auditorium? There we go.
It was this one.
So we can oh, and Henry Mayer chimed in that Miami-Dade is hosting a pruning webinar on June 18th. And I believe Dr. Orphanides is one of their speakers from an email I saw of this. So there's lots of good education going on out here. All right, we are right down to it. Unmute. Oh, unmute. I thought I was muted. All right, look on the websites for the updates and any of these answers, and reach out to us. All right. All right, Mike, I think you can speak.
Yeah, just wanted to plug that class on Friday, June 18th. It will be virtual. We are doing some limited in-person classes with a capacity of about 8 people at this point in time. And I am in the midst of a conversation today or tomorrow with my supervisor to see if we can't open that back up a little bit more. We really like to get you guys back in the extension auditorium and see each other face to face, but I'll let you know when that happens. In the meantime, check out our website, and registration is through Eventbrite. Thanks.
All right, guys, 3 minutes early. We're all good. Everybody, please remain safe, enjoy, and reach out to us if you have any questions or ideas. We look forward to hearing from you. Great, that's it. Have a good day.